how do we find truth with some of these things that are difficult to prove? I mean, on the lighter side of things, because I grew up in the 80s, I saw E.T. and I saw, I've always been fascinated with aliens, and whether it's Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Star Wars, and you've talked quite a bit about aliens.
I love the aliens. Nobody doesn't love the aliens.
Yeah, I
Right?
mean, and we should applaud the fact that we have another robot on Mars. It's mind blowing, and then bringing it back on Earth. I'm also sort of a closet fan of Bigfoot. Like, I'm a Bigfoot. Like, I want to believe that Bigfoot exists, but I don't have empirical evidence, or maybe I do. I just don't know it. And also, if you talk to a higher, a more ethereal kind of concept of God, you've talked about a lot of these things, but how can we find truth where it's not super easy to prove? What's the method?
So first you have to remove the word proof from your vocabulary. The word proof has very specific meaning in mathematics and in certain branches of logic where you can prove that something is true or is not true. In science, we don't go around proving things. We go around demonstrating that something is objectively true beyond any need to further experiment with it. So objectively true means I make a measurement and I get a result, and you make a measurement of your own design and you get the same result, and so do 10 other people. And there'll be variation among those results because our apparatuses differ a little bit, and you're a little sleepy when you took your measurement, and I'm fastidious, but too fastidious, and I measured the wrong thing. So there'll be variations in what our results are, but if the results generally agree, that is a new and emergent scientific truth. You put it in the textbook and then you move on. So truths are established, as we have come to recognize in the last 400 years. 400 years ago was basically the birth of what we now think of as modern science, where you have an hypothesis and then you test it, and then you test it again, and then test it again, and jiggle it and then test it again. And only when you have consistency of results can you then declare that something is a particular way. And I'm happy to call that an objective truth.
Can I ask you something specific then about an objective
Oh,
truth?
sure.
So, Stonehenge, right? So you talked a little bit about it. You danced around it, like toying the idea or teasing the idea that the Earth is only 6,000 years old, et cetera, et cetera. That's a common Christian belief. But like, I was seeing something.
But just to be clear,
Yeah.
that's in the Old Testament, which is Jewish, and which the Christians also embrace. So anyone who's Old Testament based and fundamental Orthodox will say that the universe was created in 6 days, not much more than 6,000 years ago. So it's not specifically Christian because Jesus has nothing to do with that.
Thank you for that clarification. So I want you to comment on, so Stonehenge, I can't remember if it's 12,000 years old and they just recently found, recently, like in the last decade, this excavation in Turkey, right, where they found all this incredible sort of Stonehenge-like structures. You know what I'm referring to?
Yeah, I just caught the headline of it, but I didn't dig deeply into it. But yeah, keep going.
So they estimate that civilization, and there was carvings on the monoliths and whatnot, very similar to a Stonehenge, but they estimate that it was like maybe 10,000 years before Stonehenge. So it predates Stonehenge by 10,000 years. So the idea that civilizations were this many years old now is like pushed back another 10,000 years. So if you were just to speculate, like in terms of, we know the Earth is, billions of years old maybe? Like, so what do you think is is there a probability that we're going to find older civilizations even predating that by 10,000 or 20,000 years? Like, how far back do you actually think it goes?
So there are multiple things going on in your commentary there and question. So let me unpack it. So first of all, what is science? You get the best evidence available and you test a hypothesis. Oh, I think Stonehenge is older than 5,000 years. Oh my gosh, I found some carbon remains, carbon dated. It puts it at 10,000 years. Wow, and where was that? It was under one of the stones, or was nearby, or I found some other culture that was nearby that has some writings, or not writings, but has some carvings. So you piece together because you don't know the answer when you're on the frontier. You're like touching the elephant, all right, and a part of the elephant, and you don't know the entire elephant. So you do this, and then if you do it responsibly as a scientist, in that case it would be anthropologists, archaeologists, do it responsibly, you would say all evidence points to this structure being this age. Now that's just my result. But you're a competitor of mine. You say, I don't think so. I think it's more modern. Or I think it's older. You go there and you check. I've got the same answer as you. And I was looking at different stones. Then a third person checks it. We're good here. Okay, Stonehenge is 12,000 years old, whatever the number is. We're good. So now the statement responsibly offered is the oldest known civilization on Earth is 12,000 years old at Stonehenge. Fine. So wait a minute. So now you're digging around in Turkey or somewhere else in the Middle East, and some stones rise up. I always wanted them to find Stargate in the sands, but they're not. Now this is 15,000 years old or 20,000. So now we have an older civilization. Fine. It doesn't negate the discoveries and the dating of the Stonehenge that had preceded it. It expands an understanding into a greater truth, okay? In the same way, Newton's laws of gravity, this is the simplest example of what you just described, but I'm bringing it back to physics briefly. Newton's laws of gravity and motion explain everything he saw in life. The moon around Earth, Earth around the sun, a running horse, an arrow through the air, a tossed object, all of this. And then we find out that at the extremes, Newton's laws are failing. Something's going wrong, and we don't understand what. And it was not until 1905, so we're now 200 years later, and 1916, that Einstein comes forth with the special and general theory of relativity, which are improvements upon the theories of motion and the theories of gravity. Improvements. So now, does it shove Newton off the table? No, because that had already been experimentally verified and determined by multiple people. This is my point. Newton was in the 1700s. That's 100 years after Galileo in 1600, where the methods and tools of science were honed. So what happens? Einstein develops this, and you know what happens? If you put low speeds and low gravity, because Einstein gets you the Big Bang, it gets you black holes and all this weird stuff in curved space-time. If you put in low speeds and low gravity in Einstein's equations, they become Newton's equations. So Newton wasn't wrong. Newton was incomplete. And new science broadens and deepens our understanding of things. And so that's why we're not going to go back and say Newton was wrong, because it was experimentally verified to be correct in the conditions under which it had been tested. We're not going to go back and say Stonehenge is now 50,000 years old, or it was made in the 17th century. That's not going to happen, because the methods and tools of science were brought to bear to establish an age date for it. But nobody was saying this, unless they're delusional or Eurocentric. They're not saying, here is the oldest civilization in the world, Stonehenge, and it happens to be my backyard, and I'm British, and I care about my own culture. Well, that's your bias coming in, all right? And if you're a good scientist, you have to check your bias at the door, because if you don't, someone else will. Our path to truth is through the results of experiment and observation. And you want Bigfoot to be running around the forest. And so it's very hard to demonstrate a negative. It's very hard. But it's possible to amass enough evidence so that to continue to think it's true would be untenable. Okay? So, for example, we have hikers everywhere throughout forests and woods and things, and everybody's got a smartphone. And every smartphone can take high-resolution video, high-resolution stills of anything, even in low lighting situations. So what you have to say to yourself is, if Bigfoot, given how Bigfoot is described, it's mammal. If it's mammal, that means it reproduces sexually, which means there has to be at least two of them. And If it's still around, presumably it has not lived as long as when it was first talked about, so it would have offspring. So if you have Bigfoot, you would find maybe Bigfoot poop somewhere. Okay. So, or bones, or you would run, or someone would have run into Bigfoot and taken high resolution video of Bigfoot. But when you wiki Bigfoot, the best evidence is a fuzzy, monochromatic 1966 or 67 video of somebody walking in the woods. So your best evidence is 50 years old. Given that we upload 6 billion videos and photos to the internet every day today, it's untenable, I think, to continue to believe that Bigfoot lurks in the woods of the Pacific Northwest. And I will add to that, by the way, we are discovering, I don't know what the number is, hundreds, if not thousands, certainly hundreds of new species of life and plants every year. Mm-hmm. Okay?
So you're saying there's a chance.
None of them are huge macroscopic mammals. Okay? They are tiny. Okay? So humans have mapped the Earth. We got this. All right? The surface of the Earth, there's no new terra incognito, whatever that's said on the edges of the maps. There's no more places like that. We've got this. We've got satellite images. Is what kind of life will elude us? Maybe something at the very bottom of the ocean, sure. But something on land, walking around, that's a mammal, a big hairy ape. Yeah, I'm thinking no. So take that as an absence of evidence in support of the absence of the object or of the creature. And you're allowed to do that and then move on. And if you're going to say, well, prove it, no, I'm saying go take up mathematics if you want to prove things. In science, we amass the evidence or recognize the absence of evidence to draw a conclusion and then move on.
Okay, so let's take that same style of thinking and apply it to God, or your definition of God.
I don't have a definition of God. Other people do, but I don't. Odd that people can define God. Given the powers they ascribe to God, the idea that they can actually define God intrigues me. But go on.
Well, so how do we apply the same kind of critical thinking to a higher power? If we think, about the traditional story of why we're here, where we're going, a binary, there was a then, now there's a now, and then after there will be something else. How do we apply that kind of critical thinking that you just did, that exercise with Bigfoot?
Well, so if you look up God in the encyclopedia, Wikipedia, they're rolling pages of all the gods that have ever been worshipped in the history of civilization. So given that we're having this conversation in the West, in the United States, I'm presuming you are meaning the Judeo-Christian God when you say God. If not, then I can answer slightly differently. But if you specifically mean the God of the Judeo-Christian Bible, I can address that. But if you're thinking God as an all-powerful being that created the universe and is looking after you, we can say, what is your evidence that this entity is looking after you? There are many pious people out there who are stricken with cancer, or who 30,000 people die in car accidents every year. In 1755, was it, in Portugal, Lisbon, Portugal, one of the holiest cities in Europe, on All Saints' Day in the morning, when most people are in church, an earthquake struck, killing 10,000 people outright, because the largest structures in the city are churches. And the most susceptible to collapse in an earthquake are the largest structures. Wait a minute. And after the earthquake, a tsunami followed, killing another 50,000 people. 70,000 people were wiped clean off the slate that morning. So if you want to say your God looks after you, there's strong evidence against that. If looking after you means that God is interested in your health or your longevity. If you want to remove health and longevity from the equation, and you can say they look after you in life and in death, well, then go ahead. Then your God is there. And God will kill 80,000 people in the morning who are all worshiping. That's God's will. That's fine. But then you're not offering me a test for the non-existence of your God. If anything that happens is fair enough for your God, so then you have to remove the methods and tools of science from your belief system. If that's how you think about it. Sorry, I keep interrupting.
I'm willing to go there. I guess when I pull back and I zoom out, just me as a kid or even as an adult looking up at the stars, the solar system, the planets, to me, it's a remarkable that the solar system, the planets, even beyond that, which I have no knowledge of to the depths that you do, I'm sure. I just look at the spherical, brilliance of the planets, or the way that everything interacts perfectly, or the way it's sort of automatically set up. To me, in my feeble brain and my feeble thinking, I think, well, maybe there is a creator, someone who designed all this, a great designer. Did this all just happen by happenstance, or through the process of science over billions and billions and billions of years? It just seems too perfectly designed. In some ways, I'm a designer doing what I do, and I marvel at it, just how perfect it is.
Yeah. So that urge to think that way is strong. It's deep, and it is fed the history of people's urges to invent religions, to become participants in divine teachings. And so you are not alone if you think that. But what you need to do is just look a little more closely at the natural world. Oh, wait a minute. An asteroid struck 65 million years ago and rendered 70% of all life forms on Earth extinct. Well, where'd the asteroid come from? Well, there's a belt of asteroids that has hundreds of thousands of asteroids in it, and tens of thousands of them are wayward, and their orbits cross the orbit of Earth. So, in fact, we live in a shooting gallery. Oh, is that the perfect design you're talking about? Or maybe not. I don't know. Oh, Earth is still cooling from the heat. By the way, okay, if you're religious, you don't say Earth formed in this way, but I'm telling you, objectively true, that Earth still has heat left over from its formation and being generated by radioactive decay of, among other things, aluminum in our crust. But that has rendered the layer below Earth's crust liquid. And Earth's crust is moving on this liquid, creating earthquakes and tsunamis that follow them, and volcanoes wreaking havoc on Earth's. But this is a perfect world you're talking about. Oh, excuse me. Okay, it's perfect. All right. Well, what else? We have viruses that their only job is to infect and make more copies of themselves. All right. How about the Bubonic Plague? Read about the 14th century, the only century in the history of human civilization where the ending population was less at the end of that 100 years than it was at the beginning, because of the devastation that Black Plague wrought on especially Europe, but also other parts of the world. Is this the perfect world you're talking about? Oh, okay. What else is happening here? We have storms, hurricanes that wipe whole cities clean. We're a little better at it now once we've learned. Okay, but still, what about childhood leukemia? Oh my gosh, where did that come from? Birth defects, just cancer in general, something we have yet to solve, but it's a perfect world to you. There's stars that explode, wreaking havoc on their environment. There's a famous story by Arthur C. Clarke, science fiction story, about a civilization that just escaped their planet. I hope I'm not merging more than one sci-fi. There were short stories. I could be merging more than one story, but that just escaped just in the nick of time before their star blew up. Okay, our star is not going to blow up, but it will die. All right, we know this. And we can say approximately when, in about 5 billion years, it will expand and render Earth a burnt cinder as we descend and vaporize into it. Oh, but it's a perfect world to you. So you can cherry pick what goes on in this universe, find all the nice things and the beautiful things and say, oh, I love this. It must be divinely created. Or you can be honest about what you bring forward and then reassess what's going on. You can still say there's a God, but that God has to have some vindictive elements to him, some really Old Testament wrath. If you want to say that there is a God responsible for it all.
Or he's a hands-off God. Sure, I get it.
Okay, but then, all right, so if you're deistic, I think is the right word there. Our founding fathers were deists that set the world into motion and then backed up and let things go. But then what is your need to have someone create it? Why not let that be a mystery and see what the methods and tools of science will bring to bear on it? And so I don't have a problem if you want to invoke God that explains everything. Go ahead. You're no longer useful in the laboratory because any mystery to you is just, well, God made that. And you're not there with me trying to figure out the causes and effects of things. You could also say, and by the way, there are many religious scientists, and this is primarily their posture. You could also say, I want to learn how God put the universe together. I want to learn the laws of physics and chemistry, and that's the handiwork of God. I have no problem with that. Go right ahead. And if you get inspiration thinking that way, by the way, inspiration can come from anywhere. You don't deduce the nature of the world from something that you see before it. There's induction and deduction. Those words, I don't even like them. I'd rather be more free form about describing how to come up with a new idea. It's like you can be on a toilet. You could be, watching a cartoon. It doesn't matter where the idea comes from. Test it, and if it works, we're good. And if you feel that God put these laws into place and you want to find the handiwork of God, go right ahead if that inspires you. And by the way, if you look at the Bible, if you read the Bible and find a passage and that predicts something about the world and you find that turns out to be true, every scientist would be mining the Bible for just that purpose. But previous efforts of people to make that happen have failed miserably. To say, well, here's some passage in the Bible, that means this will be true in the world. Let's go investigate. They get the wrong answer every time.
Yeah. I was going to say, I get some of my best ideas in the shower. So then let's apply one more thought on, alien life form. The Navy released, and I think in 2015, some top secret classified, photos and video of some sort of UFO object flying really fast. And, the Navy filmed it. I think I know your answer to this, but talk about the probability of us interacting with an alien life form of some sort of higher intelligent alien life. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, let me reshape your question. Okay. So one of them is, what are all these unidentified flying objects? I don't know. They're intriguing. I think people who like chasing UFOs should keep chasing them and maybe bring a net next time and snare one and bring it into town square. I would ask different questions, not what is the probability that these are actually aliens. By the way, ask any one of me or my professional colleagues the likelihood of there being life out there in the universe. We think it's pretty high. Intelligent life, it's a little more complicated, but maybe that's high as well. No problem agreeing with that. So, but now we should ask, what is the probability? If you want to think probabilities, by the way, in science, we don't generally speak of probabilities in the way you are invoking it. So, probabilities are 387 to 1. What does that even, are we placing bets here? What do we do? All right. So the way to think of it, yeah, it's just the way to think about it, I think, is what are the chances that an actual alien in a spaceship would visit Earth and only reveal itself to the US Navy. And in so doing, be revealed as a fuzzy, monochromatic blob. What are the chances that aliens visiting Earth would just sort of show up in the sky, move in funny ways, yet you don't have any images of them of high resolution, walking, talking, inviting you? What are the chances of that? And it seems to me that if aliens visited Earth, every single person on Earth would know it. I'm just thinking. And if they didn't want to be seen, you wouldn't, because they were so advanced, you would never say. We can hide a B-2 bomber in anybody's radar because it's a stealth bomber, and it leaves the, as I've been told, the radio, it's got the radio footprint of a bumblebee, okay? We can do that with our primitive 21st century technology. So now your alien's coming, and you're really advanced, and you get spotted by a farmer in a backyard, or you get or you only reveal yourself to U.S. Navy in flying F-18s. That just feels, it's not ringing true. And just because we don't know what it is doesn't mean you know what it is. There are mysteries. Maybe the Navy will figure out what the hell they were filming. And if they were aliens, more power to them. But figure out a way to get them next time.